So we all know the economy is not in the greatest of places right now, which is why I thought to make this guide or list, whatever you want to call it, of some of the best IEMs you can get value-wise that are very, very similar to their more expensive endgame counterparts. And here we're talking like an at least 80% similarity, like a mini version of the more expensive endgame offering, which is often very, very pricey, like at least 1 to 2k minimum, right? Starting off, we got the very highly acclaimed ELYSIAN Annihilator 2026 edition. This is pushing past 3k USD, which is more than a lot of people's rent. So obviously we're gonna try and find something cheaper, something that's very similar to it. You still get like a taste of the actual thing, but you don't need to, drop your rent money on it. And the main difference between the 2026 and the older 2023 version is that the newer one is slightly brighter now. It's a little bit more boosted when it comes to the triple air. You can call it more detailed, more technical when it comes to the micro, nuances, the air. But aside from that, they are essentially the same IEM. That aside, the value and mini version of these are the new KINERA Phoenix Call 2.0. They are slightly V-shaped leaning like the Annihilator. They're also a little bit on the brighter side when it comes to the treble. The main difference would be in the detail you get in the treble and the vocals. The bass texture overall are going to be slightly better on the Annihilator. Obviously, not 10 times better, but the difference is noticeable when you AB them. But for $200, you can't really complain given the detail, the overall dynamics, the fun factor to the new Phoenix Call, which makes it a very good alternative if you don't want to drop rent money on the Annihilator. Next, after those, we got the THIEAUDIO Valhallas. These are a very great all-rounder kind of sound. The transients, the overall imaging, the bass texture, endgame level. I would say it's on the same level as the Annihilator. I would probably take these over the 2026 version because they are just less bright. But that aside, the mini version of these would be the Zigat Crescent. If you look at the graphs, they are very, very similar. The main difference is that the Valhallas has a little bit better sub-bass texture, the overall detail in the treble, the refinement, a little bit smoother. Overall, a slight bump over the Crescent, like 15-20% maybe, but these again are $2,000. The Crescent is obviously a lot cheaper at around $300-$250 on sale. So value wise, these are the mini version of the Valhallas, and essentially they're made by the same brand, right? So it kind of makes sense. Some other honorable mentions would be the DUNU 142 and then the Kiwi's Astros. Both of these are going to be sharper when it comes to the treble. They're less refined than the Crescent. They feel a bit, I guess, peakier and more in your face when it comes to the higher regions. The Crescent overall just feels smoother and just closer. Another honorable mention would be the Odyssey. They're basically a bassier version, darker version of the Valhallas. If you want like a bit better scaling, less energy in the treble over the Crescent, then the Odysseys would be like the bassier, more low-end focused version of those. Next, we got the SUBTONIC Storm, and these were actually very hard to find a mini, value budget version of these because it's very hard to get the texture and the realism and the treble. They are a very unique listen and they are very expensive at $5,000. I think they're pushing over $6,000 now, which is kind of nuts. There were some sets that kind of came close, but they didn't have the same texture and realism, except for one IEM that I'm not gonna say too much about. It's coming soon. I would recommend you guys to save your money for this IEM. I can't say too much about it now, but yeah, these are gonna be essentially a value version of the Storm that arguably has better vocals as well. Sorry to blue ball you guys, but keep your eyes out around August to September. That aside, moving on, we got the THIEAUDIO Monarch Mark IVs next in the balance switch configuration. Now the direct mini clone to these would be the Zen's T Pro SCs. If you look at the graphs, they are very, very similar performance wise, tonality wise. I would say the main difference here is that the Mark IVs do have the ESTs. They feel smoother in the treble, they feel airier. Again, it feels more like a refined version of the SEs. I'm not saying the SEs are bad because they're still pretty good, like they're not peaky or anything, but being it, the Mark IVs are definitely a step above with the ESTs when it comes to the smoothness in the highs. But that aside, when it comes to the bass texture, the amount of like sub bass rumble, the impact, the vocal placement, the fourness, like everything feels very familiar. And for this is what, $400, $450, right? It's less than half the price of the Monarch Mark IVs, and you're getting a very close version of the Mark IVs. I would say this is like 90% of the Mark IVs. Then after those, we got the LETSHUOER CADENZA 12, the most recent version, the 2025-2026 year. These are gonna be even brighter than the 2024 version. So this is like more bright leaning, almost treble head level, I would say. So the closest, I guess, like mini version of these, the value version of these, would be the THIEAUDIO High 4 Mark IIs. They are also bright leaning, very technical, very focused in the trebles transients. Overall technicality for the price, these are $400. I'm gonna say they're like 90% of the CADENZA 12. Essentially, these are 5 times cheaper than the CAD 12. Very similar tonality, bright leaning, also tamer in the low end. Vocals are not in your face, tamer, you know, 1 to 3K region. And arguably the treble might be smoother on the high 4s because just the way the CAD 12, the newer versions are tuned, they made it more like stick out. They're more sharper in the transients. Like you get more of that imaging OCD playback, but the downside to that is that it's less smooth. That aside, the High 4 Mark IIs are just a very great value when it comes to technical performance. Then after those, speaking of 12s, we got the 64-audio U12Ts. The direct mini value version of these would be the binary EP321s. I would actually argue the 321s are tuned better. They essentially fill in the gap, the scoop in the 1 to 3K regions on the 12Ts. Obviously, technical performance, the 12Ts are gonna be better than the 321s. Technical performance wise, we're looking at like maybe 85%. And tonality, I would probably take the 321s because it just feels more natural somehow. So yeah, the MEMS is really pulling a lot of weight here when it comes to just the refinement in the treble, the technicalities, and for around $300 on sale, it's 6 times cheaper than the U12Ts and arguably tuned better than the U12Ts and very close when it comes to performance as well. Moving on, we got the KINERA Lokis next. These are over $3,000. They look very nice, but they are very pricey, and you can get the QES Halcyons for around $250, less than $250 on sale, which is more than 10 times less than the Lokis. And the sound, the tonality are very similar. The Lokis have a little bit more treble air, a little bit more treble detail. The bass texture is slightly more like weighted, slightly more impactful on the Lokis. But aside from that, they are very similarly tuned. I feel like QBers just took the Lokis and they just copied the tuning essentially and made like a mini version of it. So if you want a set that is clean and balanced with very beautiful mid-range, then the Halcyons are fantastic for like around $200, $250 on sale. After those, we got the DUNU Glaciers, and the direct mini value version would be the SIMGOT SuperMix 4. They are very similar. The Glacier is essentially just a more V-shaped version of the SuperMix 4. It has a little bit more energy when it comes to the vocals, the imaging pops out more, the treble overall feels smoother because of the ESTs. The sub bass texture, the rumble does go deeper on the Glacier. Again, it's essentially a more V-shaped version of the SuperMix 4, but the SuperMix 4 is like $150, which is like almost 10 times cheaper, and the technical performance, I'm gonna say it's like 85% there. So for the value that you're getting, the SuperMix 4 is still like a crazy set even in 2026, which is pretty nuts. Moving on, for a more unique listen, we got the FIIO FX17. These have a warmer, thicker, more mid-bass centric, but still airy, very extended treble listen. So like a dreamy, warm vibe to the sound. And the direct mini version, value version of these would be the QBR's KE4s. Main difference is that the KE4s are going to be slightly more like focused in the sub bass. You know, technicalities, obviously FX17 are going to do that better. Smoothness with the ESTs. They have like 8 EST drivers. I don't know why you need that much in a IEM, but I mean, I guess it's there if you want it. The KE4s obviously are using BAs, but the BAs are well implemented. Still gives you a warm, airy listen like the FX17, but just like the less refined and less technical version of them. But you can get these for like close to $150 on sale, which is, you know, almost 10 times less than the FX17. So if you're balling on a budget, the KE4s are still very good for a warmer, still like airy listen for under $200. Then after those, we got a bass head recommendation next for the Symphonium Titans. The direct mini and value version to these would be the Punch Audio Portazos for around $200 or less on sale. These are very similar in the sound, a bass head balanced kind of listen, not going to be as well implemented in the treble, not as like smooth as the Titans. And the overall base texture, I would say the Titans edges out slightly. But again, these are what, like $200. Titans like 1k, so these are 5 times cheaper. And if you want to get even fancier, you get the Martellos, which is a more technical version of the Portazos. And if you want to get even fancier than that, you can get the HBB Punch, which is a more refined version of the Martellos with the ESTs, and arguably better IEM in general than the Titans, I would say. So yeah, depending on your budget, Portazo, Martellos, the HBB Punch would all be like a good value to even a better version of the Titans with the HBB Punch. Next, we got the DUNU Brain Dance. Now, these are not necessarily endgame IEM, but they are very popular. A lot of people claim them to be like a value beast, endgame IEM, whatever. I think they are overrated. I think they're not very nicely tuned. I call them brain damage for a reason, because the treble, the overall tonality is just like artificially bright. But yeah, that aside, the better and cheaper version, 2 times cheaper version of the brain damage is the Meyer CK2V. These are not only less artificial, less bright leaning, less bright tilted than the brain dance, but also the sub bass texture, the overall impact is better. What was lacking on the brain damage was that the overall low end did not balance out the treble tilt, which made it artificially bright, and the CK2V essentially fixes that for 2 times cheaper. So yeah, tell your friends, tell your family, tell whoever's trying to buy brain dance, don't buy brain dance, get the CK2V. It's literally just a better version and a cheaper version of it. So I better not see any of y'all buying any brain damages in the future. Then lastly, for our endgame EQ IEM, we got the Moondrop variations, very smooth in the treble, and you also get ESTs, which make the value better than all the other new Moondrops that they have been turning out. But that aside, for our value and budget version, we have 2 options here. We got the new EPZ P40 and the SimGot EM6L. Now, the main difference here is that the P40s have a better driver, slightly better technicalities, overall a slight bump when it comes to performance, accessories, plating, for around like $50 more, but I think it's worth it because of the overall, package. They're not as smooth as the variations, obviously, because of the ESTs, but when it comes to technicalities, they are very, very close. I'm gonna say like 90% of the variations after EQ, and for what, like $100, almost 5 times cheaper. I think these are a no-brainer if you want to EQ on a budget. That aside, that is all for this video. I hope this list and mini guide was helpful. I hope I was able to save you guys some money and you don't just drop, 2k on an IEM when you could be using that for your rent and gas and whatever, right? So yeah, that aside, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see everyone in the next video.
Shout out to Mr. Dom Q, Zenu, Birak, Walker Standard, User, Tsukasa, Guava Juice Spain, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, CT Jack, Henry Claudia, Cinema Horse, 777ZK, Obi, PM the Wizard, Treble Extended, Mad Herc, TR8107, Shem Bakley, Addy672, Michael G, Trackstar, Raphael, Ori73, Juniper, Ryan, F. Nadim, Chimika, Raj, Javier, Gailblog, Ocean, BC Knight, AK131, MN Gelato, Unbalanced, Vitor Ken, Hakase, JRX, Samuel, John Simon, Archie, Brandon Fish, The Audio, Sir Eisen, JPLA, Blue Nerd, ATGBB, Virto, Geranium, Spinner, Sam Z, Raj, Your Boy Banana, Etune, Grizzly, Leanne, Scaffrog, Mark M. My name is Jeff, Francis, it's Mark, Hedgehogs, Another, and Kuya Josh. Thank you guys so much for the support.